12 uncensored and unsettling 70s forgotten horror movie gems explored in detail. The 1970s remain a golden age for a lot of many reasons. This decade gave us both vinyls and cassettes, disco music, and a plethora of new generation horror films. Marked by memorable events like the breakup of the Beatles, the death of Elvis, political scandals, and street protests, novelist Tom Wolfe rightly termed the time as the Me Decade, given the heavy shift of public ideology from communitarianism to individualism. Although American horror films ruled this decade, movies all around the world introduced a modern age influence showcasing to the world that horror movies can be artistic. Although it was clear that 60s horror played a significant role in shaping the releases of the 70s, the latter gave us truly iconic films we cannot forget. At the top of these films stand the likes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, the Rocky Horror Picture Show 1975, the Amityville Horror 1979, Halloween and Friday the 13th franchises, and the start of many years that would revere Stephen King as the one true pioneer of horror. Themes of insanity, children possessed or influenced by the devil, supernatural forces, and telepathy became very common and were stimulating for fans who enjoyed a good scare. According to Peter Vronsky, a criminal justice lawyer, most serial killings started in the beginning of the 70s and lasted till about the late 90s. This heavily impacted the films that released in the time being, as slasher horror was a subgenre that gained immense popularity. Despite people's piqued interest in the genre during this time, there were some gems that went unnoticed, and today we will be recalling some of these forgotten horror films that made the 70s the thrill that they were. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
No, please, no, no! What is it you want of me? No, no.
Number 1. The Creeping Flesh, 1973. British horror The Creeping Flesh was an excellently created satire on social norms directed by Freddie Francis, exposing Victorian England's obsession with prudency. The film mostly takes place through flashbacks where we see Professor Emmanuel Hildern telling a young doctor about his new discovery.
Do you believe in evil, Doctor?
He believes that he has found a form of evil that is very real and that he accidentally may have unleashed it upon the world much sooner than its time. He recalls the incidents that led him to this as he talks about visiting New Guinea in 1894. There he came across a humanoid skeleton which he took home in order to research, leading him to win a richer prize.
My discovery proves that there was advanced, intelligent life on Earth far earlier than has been thought.
Soon, he found out that ancient people had theories about the skeleton developing into an organism through contact with rain. To test this, he dipped the skeleton's finger in water and to his surprise saw it grow flesh. However, the discovery was premature. The ancient ones had hoped that the phenomenon would be found many years later when humanity would have the science and means to fight the evil.
No! The water mustn't touch the skeleton.
To make things right, Hildern created a serum as an antidote to the evil, and when tests on a monkey showed positive results, he injected it into his daughter Penelope. He did so in a panic, worried that she may have inherited his insanity. Penelope runs off into the city and begins to wreak havoc all around, killing people until she was restrained and brought into an asylum by Hildern's brother James. Learning of his brother's serum, James steals it along with the skeleton, hoping that he himself might win the richer prize. On the way to the asylum, the skeleton is exposed to rain and comes to life. The film then shifts its focus back to the present, where Hildern is recounting his story to the young doctor. It turns out that the laboratory Hildern was narrating his story from is actually a cell in James's asylum, and the doctors and nurses believe it is his insanity that is making him claim he is related to James and Penelope. As James tells his employees that Hildern arrived at the asylum on the same day he had won the Richer Prize, the camera pans to Hildern's hand and we see that one of his fingers, the same one he had cut off the skeleton, is missing. It is here that the film comes to an end, allowing the viewers to decide for themselves what the truth was. It is possible that Hildern was telling the truth and that his brother used him to conduct the same experiments Hildern had performed on the skeleton, but it is also a possibility that Hildern himself had become clinically insane, meaning his account cannot be trusted. Many have employed an unreliable narrator over the years, since the concept was first introduced by poet Edgar Allan Poe. In a way, the untrustworthy storyteller device helps the readers or viewers feel like they are also a part of the tale, as they get to choose the ending for themselves. Given that this film released all the way back in 1973, it was way ahead of its time. Number 2. Deranged, 1974. As many films have, psychological horror Deranged, directed by Alan Ormsby, derived its plot from notorious serial killer Ed Gein's story. Gein was known for keeping memorabilia of his victims after murdering them, as well as for body snatching from graveyards in order to recover bones and skin. Deranged, however, explores themes of necrophilia, something Gein was not known for, and hence the plot is actually only very loosely based on the life of the infamous body snatcher. The story revolves around a middle-aged man named Ezra, who was brought up by his religiously fanatic mother on a farm. Given her narrow-minded view of the world, she raises Ezra to hate women, and eventually he grows up to become a misogynist.
Filthy black-souled sluts with pus-filled sores and...
After his mother passes away from an illness, Ezra goes insane. He hallucinates that his mother is asking him to exhume her. He obliges, digging up her grave and pulling out her corpse and proceeding to put it together using fish skin and wax.
But you two ladies have a lot to talk about.
When Ezra meets psychic Maureen Shelby and murders her as the two were getting intimate, a switch is flicked in his mind, and he then goes on a serial killing rampage. One of his prominent victims, Mary, is tricked into coming home when Ezra fools her into thinking he can give her a spare tire for her broken down car. On entering, she is terrified to find many corpses, including Ezra's mother's body. As he attempts to molest her, she is able to trick him into freeing her, and even though she manages to smash a bottle on his head, he beats her to death with a human femur bone. Ezra then speaks with Mary's friend Harlan and finds his next victim in Sally, Harlan's nephew, Brad's girlfriend. Ezra later shows up at Sally's place of work to shoot her.
What are you doing, Ez?
Sally manages to survive as the bullet only grazes her but is kidnapped by Ezra. As she frees herself and runs into the woods on foot, she does not have much luck as Ezra finds her and shoots her properly this time. Harlan and Brad manage to get a hold of the sheriff and track Ezra down just as he was skinning Sally in his barn and laughing over a bowl of blood. The film ends with a voiceover narrating. A few days later, a group of townspeople, reportedly led by Harlan Coots under cover of night, burn the Cobb farm to the ground. As the line progressively gets quieter, the audience has a moment to let the film's insanity sink in. Ormsby used the most horrific parts of Hitchcock's Psycho, real-life serial killer Ed Gein, and the fascinating concept of necrophilia as separate pieces of inspiration, putting together this rollercoaster ride of a film that surely did not get as much appreciation as it deserved. Number 3. Stranger in Our House. Wes Craven directed television horror film Stranger in Our House, which was based on Lois Duncan's novel Summer of Fear. The plot follows Julia, who moves in with her aunt, uncle, and their 2 children Rachel and Bobby after her parents are killed in a car accident on the East Coast. Things seem a bit odd from the very start, as Julia's accent is uncharacteristic of the East Coast, and she begins to develop a more sophisticated personality the longer that she lives with the new family, discarding her initial painfully shy persona. She seems to take an added interest in Rachel, or rather all her things and those close to her. Not only does Julia manage to attract the attention of Rachel's boyfriend, but she even becomes close friends with her best friend Carolyn.
Show a little consideration.
Okay.
And don't speak to me in that tone of voice.
After Rachel's horse breaks its leg and has to be euthanized, she goes fishing into Julia's room, where she finds evidence pointing to the fact that Julia may have been performing acts of black magic, a fact confirmed by Rachel's neighbor Jarvis.
Techniques than you can shake a stick at. It depends on the person using the technique, the strength of her gift or his gift.
As Rachel begins her research on occult, she starts to believe that Julia may not be who she claims to be. All this while Julia continues to cause pain for Rachel's family, planning for her mother to meet with an automobile accident, and even going so far as to use sexual advances on Rachel's father. As Rachel's suspicions about Julia being a witch are confirmed by developing photos she took of her earlier, she and Julia become entangled in a cat and mouse chase, where Rachel tries to escape the clutches of the witch. Rachel escapes the house and gets into a car with her boyfriend to stop her mother's accident from taking place, while Julia follows them in another car. They manage to evade her and save the mother while Julia's car falls off of a cliff and explodes. After some digging, Rachel and her family find out that the person living with them was not Julia at all, but her nanny Sarah, who had survived the accident that claimed the life of the real Julia along with her parents.
Who are you?
I'm Sarah, your aunt and uncle's cleaning gal.
The film ends as we see another family welcoming a nanny into their home, and it is none other than Sarah posing once again as Julia. The film stands out in comparison to other entries in Craven's large filmography. He has rightfully earned his place as a pioneer of the horror genre, though the subgenre he specializes in is slasher films. Stranger in Our House borders the subgenre of suspense, and though this is not historically Craven's forte, he proves himself a versatile filmmaker. The movie brings to mind the 2015 biblical horror The Black Coat's Daughter, which stars Kiernan Shipka and Emma Roberts, who brilliantly carry out their roles as Satan's daughter, whilst pretending to be someone else. Both the films have heavy themes exploring witchcraft and the occult, making them intriguing to sit through and an interesting watch to say the least.
Yes. Yes.
Number 4. Sisters, 1972. Directed by Brian De Palma, this psychological thriller was initially released as Blood Sisters in the UK and starred Margot Kidder, Jennifer Salt, and Charles Durning. The film was based on the famous twins from Russia named Masha and Dasha that were conjoined at the pelvis and kidnapped from their mother at birth to be studied by scientists. The film presented itself as a great watch, but due to the heavy influences of Alfred Hitchcock in the cinematography, it almost feels as if one is watching a homage to the Psycho director. Palma has used similar composition styles in his famous film Carrie, and even collaborated with Bernard Herrmann, who worked with Hitchcock frequently to compose the music of Sisters. The story follows Danielle, a model who brings home a man after a date. While out, she is followed by her ex-husband Emile, as he keeps a close eye on both Danielle and her date Phil. After finding out that her twin sister Dominique is there to wish her a happy birthday, Phil steps out to buy them a cake, and on returning is brutally stabbed to death by Dominique. After the murder, Emile and Danielle try their best to cover up the scene so that Dominique does not get caught. However, a reporter that lives across them, Grace, watches the whole thing unfold in horror and contacts the police for help. Seeing as how she has previously written reports exposing police brutality and taking into account that Phil was a black man, the police do not take Grace seriously at all. On reaching Danielle's apartment, all evidence has been wiped out, leaving Grace determined to investigate the murder herself.
Did a man come in here this morning and buy a birthday cake?
Lady, 10 men came in and bought 10 birthday cakes.
One day, as Grace follows Danielle and Emile into a mental institution, she gets caught and hypnotized by Emile to believe that
There was nobody because there was no
Following this, during a bizarre dream that edges on reality, Grace finds out the truth about the secret that Emile and Danielle are willing to pay any price possible to protect. Although they were conjoined twins, Danielle and Dominique have always had very different personalities, the latter being aggressive, short-tempered, and even needing psychiatric help. When Danielle got pregnant with Emile's baby, Dominique stabbed her in the stomach, causing a miscarriage. After this, Emile found a way to separate the twins through surgery, but it ended up killing Dominique. Unable to cope with the tragic loss of her beloved sister, Danielle developed a personality disorder wherein she assumes the identity of Dominique each time Danielle is involved with someone sexually and ends up killing them. Danielle then has no memory of what she has done and goes on to clear her sister's mess. Emile kisses Danielle to bring out Dominique, and she ends up killing him in front of Grace, who is half conscious. When she wakes up, she sees Danielle mourning over Emile, not having any memory of what she had done. Later, Grace is questioned by a detective, where she continues to chant,
There's absolutely nothing wrong with me. All I know is there was no body because there was no murder.
The big reveal of Dominique's true identity takes us right back to the 1960 classic Psycho, where we see the infamous Norman Bates assume the personality of his mother to kill anyone that he has sexual feelings towards. Both Psycho and Sister's Take explore the bold themes of psychological horror, encompassing everything that would bring a smile to Freud's face.
Tear him up! No, Willie! No, Willie! Willie, no!
Number 5. Willard, 1971. Based on Stephen Gilbert's novel Ratman's Notebooks, Willard is a horror thriller directed by Daniel Mann. Although this film did well in the box office on its release, it makes its way on this list of underrated horror films from the 70s because it is not widely remembered today as it should be. The plot revolves around Willard Stiles, a recluse and a social misfit who lives with his ill-tempered mother Henrietta. On his 27th birthday, after his mother asks him to get rid of the rats in the house, Willard takes pity on the creatures, and instead of killing them as he was supposed to, he ends up befriending them. At work, his boss Al continues to harass him on a daily basis and pays Willard less than what he has been working for.
Now, I haven't had a raise since my father died, and I work weekends and I work nights.
When Al pressures Willard into selling him his house, Willard crashes one of his boss's parties with his rats and lets them loose on the food. Meanwhile, he learns that his mother has passed away, leaving the mortgaged house and debts behind for Willard to take care of. With his rat collection growing steadily, Willard slowly starts to run out of money and food for them, and so he breaks into the house of one of Al's friends and steals a large sum of money. The very next day, Al spots one of the mice in the office and kills it.
Oh, I got it. Well, my party, will you?
As if it was not devastating enough for Willard, as a last resort to get him to sell his house, Al fires Willard as well. When Willard shows up at the office with his horde of rats to confront Al, a freak accident causes the boss to fall out of a window. Seeing the rats devouring Al's dead body, Willard is terrified and decides to drown them in a pit. That night, as Willard is having dinner with a woman in his house, he realizes that the rats he tried to drown have escaped and are now plotting to attack him. The evening turns into a cat and mouse chase, with Willard the mouse and the rats the cat, ironically. Willard is unable to fight off that many rats, and eventually he is swallowed by the whole bunch of them as they gnaw through him. In a strange ending, we see one of the rats breaking the fourth wall and staring blankly at the audience as if trying to make a statement. The film made its mark because of how it managed to make a regular house pest so horrifying. People see rats every now and then, if not in their homes, then elsewhere. But this film took those furry creatures and made them into something so terrifying, it would make the audience keep a fearful eye out for the animals. It almost feels like the film is a sinister take on the children's story The Pied Piper and the Rats. In that story, we see the Piper's mistreatment at the hands of the townspeople after he hypnotizes the rats away from them. As a punishment for the town, he chooses to do the same to their children. But watching Willard makes us wonder what it would be like if the rats eventually turned on the Pied Piper himself. Number 6. Vampyres, 1974. This horror erotica was directed by José Ramón Larraz and faced its fair share of backlash because of how openly it tackled themes of violence, bisexuality, lesbianism, and sex. However, the same themes are also the reason why the film has gained a cult following today. The piece tells the story of a couple, John and Harriet, who camp out in their caravan in the middle of the woods of an English estate. While there, Harriet complains of seeing certain female figures, but John does not take her seriously, thinking she is just getting spooked from being in the dark, shadowy woods. The figures that Harriet sees are Fran and Miriam, two vampire lovers that live in a house on the very same estate. One day, a hitchhiker, Ted, is lured into their house by Fran, where they indulge in sexual acts. When Ted awakes, Fran is nowhere to be found, and he stumbles upon John and Harriet, who offer him some coffee in their caravan. Miriam, too, lures in another man named Rupert the next day, though she kills him as soon as she is done having sex with him. Miriam advises Fran to do the same with Ted, as she does not want her to get too attached to her prey. Fran obliges, and the two vampires feed on Ted till he is left half dead in their house. In his anemic state, Ted hears Fran and Miriam bring home another suitor, and he uses this opportunity to escape to John and Harriet's caravan. This move proves extremely futile as Fran and Miriam catch up to him and murder the couple, though Ted is able to get away. The film ends when Ted is found by a realtor the next morning who believes him to be a drunkard. The realtor then goes on to show Fran and Miriam's house to an elderly couple and tells them the property has been hard to sell because of its reputation for being haunted by the ghosts of two women. Though a typical vampire film with not much originality in its plot, Vampyre's success was mainly a result of the filmmaker's bold choices and actresses who did not shy away from embracing sexuality on screen. This worked especially well because the decade in which the movie was released was seen as a time of liberation for women, prioritizing acceptance of one's body. Number 7. Fascination, 1979. French horror Fascination, directed by Jean Rollin, tells the story of a thief named Marc who takes refuge in a nearby chateau after escaping from his fellow thieves. While there, he comes across two women, Ava and Elizabeth, who appear to be in a relationship but are portrayed as bisexual as they take special interest in Marc. After Ava sleeps with Marc, the thieves looking for Marc arrive at the chateau where she hands them the gold he stole. One of the thieves' wives even takes away her dress, and enraged, Ava seduces her husband for revenge. Ava goes on to kill both husband and wife and two more thieves in the stable. Later that night, a Marchioness arrives along with her female servants, leaving Marc as the only male subject to all that female attention. When he finds out that all this is a ruse to drain his blood and drink it as part of a ritual, Marc is aided by Elizabeth and the two escape the chateau. When Ava tries to stop them, Elizabeth shoots her, claiming she was angry at Ava for sleeping with Marc. The Marchioness and her servants then end up drinking Ava's blood instead. Marc and Elizabeth continue to walk through the woods, and he confesses his feelings for her, though she shoots him, saying she does not feel the same. The film comes to an end as Elizabeth and the Marchioness walk off into the sunrise hand in hand. Some may argue that the film is not horror, rather a love story, but using that ambiguity, we felt it important to include this film in our list just so we could talk about its brilliant plot. The way the sexual energy is evenly distributed throughout the film makes it more romantic, and it's not just erotic. The cherry on top would have been if the women were vampires, but then again, the ritualistic blood drinking performed by humans also makes sense, I guess. Number 8. The Legend of Hell House, 1973. Directed by John Huff, this supernatural horror deals with the classic storyline of a group of people on a mission to investigate a haunted house despite clear signs warning them not to. Physicist Dr. Lionel Barrett is recruited by a millionaire to launch an investigation into the Mount Everest of haunted houses and brings with him his wife, Anne, and 2 mediums to do so. Florence is a spiritual medium, whereas Ben is a physical medium, as well as the only survivor of a similar investigation of the house almost 20 years ago. It is known to all that the previous owner of the house was a deranged and sadistic man named Belasco who carried out perverted murders inside, leaving the place haunted by many spirits of his victims. Barrett, being a man of science, is convinced that the house has a focused electromagnetic energy which makes it seem haunted, and once they rid the house of this, things will go back to normal. Barrett then begins to notice that he is the target of certain attempted attacks, and he blames Florence for forcing the house's energies to act against him. Meanwhile, an indifferent Ben shuts his mind off to the house, for he only cares about getting paid. Barrett's wife Anne is also subjected to weird happenings, though her encounters seem a little different. She starts to have erotic dreams each time she is asleep, and even attempts to seduce Ben while in a trance before he is able to snap out of it. In an attempt to help one of the spirits who they believe is the murderous owner's son, Daniel, Florence allows the spirit to possess her, and Barrett assembles a machine to rid the house of its electromagnetic energy. This proves futile as both Florence and Barrett are killed by the malevolent forces of the house, who become more aggressive when the machine comes to life. Ben and Anne later realize that the house is not haunted by many spirits, but actually only by the previous owner's spirit posing as Minnie. They find a hidden door in the chapel of the house, and on entering, to their horror, see Belasco's preserved body sitting up right on a chair. Cutting open his trousers, Ben and Anne find that in an attempt to appear taller and scarier, Belasco had amputated his own limbs and replaced them with prosthetics. He had also lined the room his body is preserved in with lead, foreshadowing the presence of electromagnetic energy and life after death. Now that the room is wide open and Belasco's body fully exposed, Ben and Anne activate Barrett's machine and walk out of the house, believing that they have led Belasco to the afterlife and freed the house of many spirits. The film's ending is quite concrete, but some audiences were convinced that the machine did not work, leaving space for a possible sequel to The Legend of Hell House. However, in our opinion, a prequel would be much better, outlining what happened with the investigators who tried to search the house 20 years ago, and how Ben was the only one who managed to survive. Number 9. House, 1977. This film was slammed gravely by critics, causing it to become a box office failure, but it managed to make its way on our list due to its subsequent cult status. House was a horror comedy directed by Nobuhiko Aobayashi. Toho co-famously asked the director to create a film that would act as a spoof for Spielberg's famous Jaws, and Obayashi did not disappoint. Having used any and every kind of special effects from the time, the film proved to be a fan favorite despite critics' disdain. Perhaps it was the absolute absurdity of some aspects of the film which caused it to be a hit with a younger population. A girl named Gorgeous because she is pretty, a girl named Mac because he likes to eat, and someone named Melody because she likes music. This is the exact kind of genius that makes House what it is. The film follows Gorgeous, who goes to live at her aunt's house as she is upset about her father's new marriage. Along with her, she takes her friends Prof, Melody, Mac, Kung Fu, Sweet, and Fantasy. When they reach the aunt's house, they are unable to find her there, and instead they encounter all sorts of supernatural beings. The group are then chased around by possessed objects and bitten by the house, which is practically coming to life. The house has them running scared until the children come across the aunt's personal diary. Although they never seem to get the point of opening the diary, Gorgeous, who is possessed by the aunt's spirit, tells them what is presumably written inside. When her aunt died waiting for her lover to return, she placed a curse on her house. The property has since taken to possessing any unmarried girls that enter and eating them up. The next morning when her stepmother arrives, Gorgeous extends her hand to shake it with her own, and as soon as contact is made, the stepmother burns away to ashes. Despite a straightforward plot about a haunted house, the film's deliberate inconsistencies make for a weird watch to say the least. The only positive of the film is that the audience can enjoy the ride, especially when the action unfolds and kids start getting eaten left and right. There is no conclusion or moral of the story to give it a meaningful ending. Kobayashi's outlandish approach to the execution of this film makes it ambitious beyond its years, and had they not been limited by the technology of their time, the makers could probably have created something even more visually grand. Number 10. Tourist Trap, 1979. Directed by David Schmoller, this supernatural slasher film is set in a roadside museum that is sure to give you the creeps. When a bunch of youngsters stumble upon it, they choose to step inside, against all rational logic. Just to bring out the flavor of the classic goth road trip, Schmoller mixes in some dark comedy, making it even more memorable.
Woody?
Right at the start of the film, we see protagonist Eileen's boyfriend get killed when he is locked in the back of a gas station after their car breaks down. While Eileen and the rest of the group continue to look for Woody, they come across a mysterious, eccentric man with a shotgun named Mr. Slauson. Slauson offers to get them the parts they need to fix their vehicles. Jerry, the only remaining guy in the group, goes with Slauson to fix the car. The man insists the girls stay behind in the town museum, as it would be safer. As one would expect, things start getting weird inside the museum as objects start flying about and the mannequins start to look creepier than before. Eileen is then choked to her death with the scarf she is wearing, though her friends think she has left to go look for Slauson and Jerry. The film's climax show the friends Jerry, Becky, and Molly all trapped in Slauson's basement, with Jerry claiming the killer is Slauson's brother Davey. They witness a girl named Tina getting plastered and suffocating to death before she herself is turned into one of the mannequins, the way that Eileen was after her death. Becky discovers that the brother is actually just Slauson in a mask killing people and turning them into mannequins, and soon she is murdered by the figure of an Indian chief. Jerry too is turned into a mannequin as he tries to save Molly. Noticing Slauson dancing about with a mannequin of his dead wife, Molly becomes frightened and kills him with an axe in the heat of the moment. The film comes to an end as we see Molly, who has now become insane, driving away from the town surrounded by the mannequins of her friends. A film with very similar locations, storyline, and characters was released in 2005 titled House of Wax. This film also followed a group of friends that gets stranded in a ghost town and ends up getting killed in order to be turned into wax statues. The killer is revealed to be the eccentric town guy who introduces himself as someone who could fix their car. Although the filmmakers have not confirmed it, many fans believe that House of Wax is actually a remake of Tourist Trap. The only difference between the two is that there is no supernatural element in House of Wax. It is all the work of a human who is turned into a psychotic killer. In Tourist Trap, both Slauson and the mannequins he creates have telekinetic powers. Number 11. The Manitou, 1978. William Girdler's body horror The Manitou was based on a novel of the same name by author Graham Masterton. The story is inspired by the spiritual concept of the Native American Manitou, a life force that they believed in, which was supposedly omnipresent and could manifest everywhere. The story revolves around Karen, a young woman who visits a hospital in San Francisco because of a neck tumor. After having multiple tests and x-rays, the doctors find something bizarre, claiming that there is a fetus growing inside her tumor. Perplexed by this weird discovery, the doctors start running more tests on the growth, but the fetus perceives the x-rays used on it as a threat. As a result of this, its development is stunted, and hence the abnormality tries to protect itself. It turns out that the creature is Misquamacus, an old Native American shaman who has been reincarnated. The purpose of the reincarnation is solely vengeful, as he detests the white men who had forcefully entered and conquered America, stealing land from the natives. Once Karen discovers this, she asks her boyfriend Harry for help. A psychic fortune teller, Harry believes the best thing to do would be to contact another shaman. He asks a man named John to help them fight this reincarnation and save Karen. The spirits that John is able to summon prove too weak to fight the Manitou, and hence they realize that they can only try and send him back to where he came from. They perform ritual after ritual to help Karen, but all fails and Misquamacus summons the spirit of the Great Old One to destroy mankind. In native theology, the Great Old One is as malevolent as Satan himself, and so Harry and John try their best to fight it off. When all else fails, the spirits that were summoned by John to help Karen use her as a medium to focus all their energies at once and defeat the Great Old One along with the Manitou. The film ends with John giving a stern reminder to Harry that although Misquamacus' body is gone, his spirit still lives.
What are you talking about? He's dead.
The body's dead. Manitou lives on, remember?
The Manitou may not fall into the category of biblical horror because it does not tackle the religion of Christianity, but the themes it uses are very similar to that of biblical horror. The film is also interesting because of the insight given into the Native American culture and theology, and the piece evokes some serious questions about the way their land was snatched away from them. Number 12, The Shout, 1978. Another British horror on our list, The Shout was directed by Jerzy Skolimowski and based on Robert Graves' short story of the same name. This film is the most unique selection on the list because of its genre. It is a sound horror, and hence the director had to make use mostly of brilliant noise technology to scare the living daylights out of the audience. Some would say it worked very well, claiming this to be the scariest sound horror to date. Credit for this largely goes to the film's sound director Alan Bell, as well as because of the blood-curdling sound design he provided. The film is shown in retrospect as we see two patients of a mental asylum chatting during a cricket match. They talk about a village couple, Anthony and Rachel, as they are visited by a shaman magician named Crossley, who is the patient narrating the story. Fascinated by his aboriginal magic skills, the couple asks him what more he can do. Crossley tells them that he has the ability to create a shout that could be fatal, which piques the couple's curiosity further. As the film progresses, Crossley gets increasingly close to Rachel, while Anthony is distanced from her both emotionally and physically. Finally, it is time for Crossley to demonstrate his deadly shout, and he chooses Anthony as his guinea pig. The film unfolds in slow motion as Crossley walks the couple out to sand dunes in the middle of nowhere in order to find the perfect safe place for his exhibition. He tells Anthony to cover his ears only once the shout has begun. When Crossley finally lets out the shout, the scene is extended so that the audience is so engrossed in the sound, they may worry about falling victim to it themselves. They see that the sheep around that had heard the shout unprotected have all fallen to the sand dead, proving that Crossley was not lying. It might be expected that the shout would release the tension, dispelling the desolate feeling of impending doom that Crossley had brought with him into Rachel and Anthony's lives, but that is not the case. If anything, the atmosphere becomes more morbid and more real, and that is the beauty of Skolimowski's film. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.